The lasso sang through the air like a hawk diving for prey, and Zelda Freeman had the runaway steer on the ground before Owen Lattimer could even process what he had just witnessed. His foreman, Red Donnelly, stood slack-jawed beside the corral fence, his own rope still coiled uselessly at his hip, while this slip of a woman in dusty leather chaps finished hog-tying the beast in under 15 seconds flat. Owen pushed his hat back on his head, squinting against the harsh Texas sun that beat down on his Marfa ranch this scorching afternoon in July of 1884. He had seen plenty of ranch hands come through these parts claiming they could work cattle, but this woman moved like water flowing downhill, each motion purposeful and swift. The steer barely had time to bellow before it was trussed up tighter than a Sunday roast. Red finally found his voice. "Well, I'll be damned." Zelda stood up, dusting off her hands on her worn denim pants, and walked over to where the two men stood gaping. She was 22 years old, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair pulled back in a practical braid that hung down past her shoulder blades. Her green eyes held a challenge as she approached, and Owen noticed the way she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing left to prove. "The steer is secured," she said simply, her voice steady despite the exertion. "You need anything else demonstrated, or can we discuss the job now?" Owen had placed an advertisement in the Marfa newspaper 3 weeks ago for experienced ranch hands. The summer of 1884 had been brutal, and he had lost 2 good men to better-paying railroad work up north. His cattle operation needed skilled workers who could handle the demanding work of managing over 3,000 head across his sprawling property. When Zelda Freeman had shown up at dawn that morning, asking about the position, Owen had been skeptical. Not because she was a woman, though that certainly raised eyebrows in these parts, but because she looked too young, too slight to handle the backbreaking labor required. Then she had asked for a chance to prove herself, and Owen prided himself on being a fair man. He had pointed to the meanest, most ornery steer in his herd, a beast that had escaped the corral twice that week and given Red and the other hands fits trying to recapture it. If she could rope and tie that animal faster than his foreman could, Owen had told her, then they would talk seriously about employment. He had expected her to fail. Instead, he had watched her assess the steer with the keen eye of a seasoned wrangler, calculate her approach, and execute the whole operation with a precision that made his current foreman look like a greenhorn fresh off the wagon train. Owen made his decision in that moment, one that would change the course of both their lives in ways neither could have imagined. "You just became my new foreman," he said, the words coming out before he had fully thought them through. Red's head whipped around. "Boss, you cannot be serious." "Dead serious." Owen kept his eyes on Zelda, watching her reaction. Her expression remained carefully neutral, but he saw something flicker in those green eyes. Surprise, maybe, or perhaps satisfaction. "Red, you are a good man and a hard worker, but what I just saw was the best roping I have witnessed in 20 years of ranching. Miss Freeman, if you can do that consistently and help train the other hands to improve their skills, then you are exactly what this operation needs." Red's face flushed red, living up to his nickname for reasons beyond his copper-colored hair. "This is horseshit, Owen. You cannot put a woman in charge of the men. They will not listen to her, and you know it." Zelda spoke before Owen could respond. "Then they can find work elsewhere. I did not ride 3 days from El Paso to play nursemaid to cowboys with fragile pride. If they want to learn, I will teach them. If they want to complain, they can do it on someone else's ranch." The steel in her voice made Owen hide a smile. He had been right about her. This woman had backbone. "Red, I am not replacing you completely. You will still oversee the northern pastures and the daily operations. Miss Freeman will focus on training and handling the difficult animals. Consider it a partnership." Red looked like he wanted to argue further, but something in Owen's tone must have warned him off. The foreman gave a curt nod, shot Zelda a look that could have curdled milk, and stalked off toward the bunkhouse. Owen would deal with smoothing those ruffled feathers later. Right now, he wanted to know more about this mysterious woman who roped like she had been born with a lasso in her hand. "Let us go to the house and work out the details of your employment," Owen said, gesturing toward the two-story ranch house that sat at the heart of his property. It was a sturdy structure built from local limestone, designed to stay cool in the brutal Texas heat. His late father had constructed it back in 1868, shortly after returning from the war between the states, and Owen had inherited both the house and the ranch when the old man passed 5 years ago. Zelda fell into step beside him, her boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each stride. Up close, Owen could see the calluses on her hands, the small scars that marked someone who had spent years working with livestock and rough terrain. She was not tall, maybe 5.5 feet, but she moved with an economy of motion that spoke of strength and endurance. "I appreciate the opportunity," she said as they walked, "though I have to ask why you made such a quick decision." Most ranch owners would have wanted to see more than one successful roping before handing over a foreman position. Owen considered her question as they climbed the steps to the wide front porch. "I have been ranching since I was old enough to sit a horse. I know skill when I see it, and I know desperation when I see it too. You have the first in spades, and I am guessing you have a fair share of the second as well, or you would not have ridden 3 days to Marfa, Texas for a ranch hand position." He pushed open the front door and held it for her. Zelda paused for just a moment, as if weighing whether to share more, then stepped inside. The interior of the house was cooler, with thick walls that kept out the worst of the heat. Owen led her to his office, a practical room lined with account books and ranch records, and gestured for her to take a seat in one of the leather chairs facing his desk. "You are right," Zelda said once they were both seated. "I was desperate, though perhaps not in the way you think. My father ran a small cattle operation outside El Paso. He taught me everything about working livestock, and I was good at it. Better than my brothers, if I am being honest. When he died last year, my oldest brother inherited the ranch, and he made it clear he had no use for a sister who acted like a ranch hand instead of a proper lady. He wanted me to marry some shopkeeper in town and settle down to a respectable life." "I take it that idea did not appeal to you," Owen said, leaning back in his chair, "about as much as a rattlesnake in my bedroll." A ghost of a smile crossed Zelda's face. "I tried working at other ranches around El Paso, but word gets around fast in a small community. My brother told everyone who would listen that I was difficult and unmanageable. No one would hire me for anything beyond kitchen work or laundry. So I packed my belongings, took my horse, and headed east looking for a place where my brother's reputation did not precede me." Owen nodded slowly, understanding more than she probably realized. He knew what it was like to fight against expectations, to want something different than what society deemed appropriate. "Well, Miss Freeman, in Marfa you will be judged by your work, not your brother's opinions. I will pay you $60 a month, plus room and board. That is more than I pay the other hands, but foreman positions command higher wages. You will have your own room in the house, since I do not think the bunkhouse is appropriate." Zelda's eyes widened slightly. $60 is generous. "Very generous. I pay for skill and results. You have demonstrated both." Owen pulled out a ledger and began noting down the details of their agreement. "I will expect you to work with all the hands, teaching them better roping and tying techniques. We have Roundup coming in September, and I want this crew operating like a well-oiled machine. We also have some wild Mustangs that need breaking, and several pregnant mares that will need careful handling when they foal. Think you can manage all that? I can manage it, Zelda said firmly. Though I imagine some of your hands will not make it easy at first. Probably not, Owen agreed. But they will come around once they see what you can do, and if they do not, well, like you said, they can find work elsewhere. I have no patience for men who let their pride get in the way of learning. They spent the next hour discussing the specifics of the ranch operation. Owen found himself impressed by Zelda's knowledge and her thoughtful questions about his herd management practices. She asked about his breeding program, his water sources, his plans for the winter grazing season. It became clear very quickly that she understood cattle ranching at a deep level, far beyond simple rope work. When they finally concluded their business discussion, Owen showed her to her room on the second floor. It was a modest space with a bed, dresser, and washstand, but it had a window that looked out over the eastern pastures and caught the morning light beautifully. I will let you get settled, Owen said from the doorway. Dinner is at 6. My cook, Mrs. Chen, sets a good table. I will introduce you to the full crew tonight and you can start your new duties tomorrow morning. Zelda turned from the window where she had been gazing out at the land. Thank you, Mr. Lattimer. I will not disappoint you. Owen, he corrected. If we are going to be working closely together, we might as well skip the formalities. And I do not think you are capable of disappointment, Zelda Freeman. You are going to shake this place up in the best possible way. After he left, Owen found himself thinking about his new foreman as he returned to his office. There was something compelling about her, beyond just her obvious skills. She had a quiet intensity, a focus that reminded him of the best horses he had ever trained. The ones who were smart enough to think for themselves but loyal enough to give their all when it mattered. He had not lied when he said he had been ranching since childhood. The Lattimer family had deep roots in Texas, going back to before statehood. His grandfather had been among the first settlers in this harsh, beautiful region near the Davis Mountains. Owen himself was 31 years old, and he had spent nearly every one of those years learning the cattle business. He had inherited the ranch at 26 when his father died of pneumonia during a particularly brutal winter, and he had been working himself half to death ever since trying to expand and improve the operation. Romance had never been high on his list of priorities. Oh, there had been a few brief courtships over the years. A ranch owner's daughter in Fort Davis who had bored him to tears with her constant chatter about parties and dresses. A school teacher in Marfa who had wanted him to sell the ranch and move to San Antonio. Neither relationship had lasted more than a few months. Owen had begun to resign himself to a solitary life, married to his work and content with the company of his horses and cattle. But something about Zelda Freeman had lodged itself in his mind like a burr under a saddle. The way she had moved when roping that steer, fluid and confident. The challenge in her eyes when she met his gaze. The steel in her voice when she told Red that complainers could work elsewhere. Owen found himself looking forward to working with her in a way that had nothing to do with improved ranch operations, and everything to do with wanting to know more about the woman behind those green eyes. Dinner that evening proved as tense as Owen had anticipated. The ranch employed 8 hands in addition to Red, and they ranged from grizzled veterans like Pete Sanderson, who had been cowboying since before the Civil War, to young Johnny Martinez, barely 19 and still learning the ropes. When Owen introduced Zelda as the new foreman, the response ranged from stunned silence to barely concealed hostility. Pete spoke up first, his weathered face creasing into deeper lines as he frowned. "Boss, I mean no disrespect, but you are really going to put this girl in charge of training us. I have been working cattle since before she was born. Then you should have no trouble demonstrating that experience, Zelda said calmly before Owen could respond. I am not here to insult anyone's abilities. I am here to help improve our collective skills so this ranch runs more efficiently. If you have techniques you want to share, I am happy to learn from you as well. Her diplomatic response seemed to take some of the wind out of Pete's sails, but Johnny Martinez looked unconvinced. This is crazy. Girls do not rope cattle, they cook and sew and have babies. This girl just roped and tied a steer faster than your current foreman, Owen said, his voice taking on a hard edge, which makes her more than qualified to teach you how to do your job better. Now, you all have a choice. You can accept that Zelda Freeman knows what she is doing and take advantage of the opportunity to learn from one of the best ropers I have ever seen. Or you can collect your wages and ride out tomorrow morning. It is entirely up to you. The silence that followed was thick enough to cut with a knife. Owen met each man's eyes in turn, making it clear he was not bluffing. Finally, Pete gave a slow nod. I will give it a chance, boss, but I reserve the right to change my mind if this does not work out. Fair enough, Owen said. Anyone else want to voice concerns now, or are we good to move forward? No one else spoke up, though Owen noticed several of the hands shooting speculative glances at Zelda throughout the rest of the meal. He also noticed that Red barely touched his food and left the table as soon as it was polite to do so. That situation would need addressing soon, before it festered into real trouble. After dinner, Owen found himself alone with Zelda on the front porch. She had come outside for some air, and he had followed on the pretense of checking on the horses in the nearby stable. That went about as well as could be expected, Zelda said, leaning against the porch railing and staring out at the darkening landscape. The sun had set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, and the first stars were beginning to emerge. They will come around, Owen said, moving to stand beside her. Pete especially. He grumbles, but he is a good man who respects skill. Once he sees what you can do, he will be your biggest supporter. And Red? Zelda asked. He looked like he wanted to put a bullet in me at dinner. Red is dealing with wounded pride. He has been foreman here for 3 years, and I just essentially demoted him in front of the whole crew. I will talk to him, make sure he understands this is not personal. Owen paused, then added honestly, though I am not going to lie and say I have not been considering making changes for a while. Red is good at managing day-to-day operations, but he is not great at training or improving efficiency. We need both. Zelda was quiet for a moment, and Owen found himself very aware of how close they were standing. He could smell the faint scent of leather and sage that seemed to cling to her, along with something else that was uniquely her own. It had been a long time since he had been this physically aware of a woman's presence. Can I ask you something? Zelda said suddenly, turning to face him. In the fading light, her eyes looked almost gray instead of green. Of course. Why did you really hire me? And do not say it was just because of my roping skills. You could have offered me a regular ranch hand position if that was all you cared about. Making me foreman was a bold move, one that is clearly causing friction with your crew. So why did you do it? Owen considered his answer carefully. He could give her a practical explanation about efficiency and skill development, but something about the directness of her gaze made him want to be equally direct. Because I saw someone who had been told she could not do something she was clearly born to do, and I decided I was not going to be another person who underestimated you. Maybe that was reckless. Maybe I am going to regret it when half my crew quits tomorrow. But I have learned to trust my instincts about people, and my instincts tell me you are exactly what this ranch needs. Zelda held his gaze for a long moment, and Owen saw something shift in her expression. The carefully maintained walls came down just a fraction, and he glimpsed the vulnerability beneath the tough exterior. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You have no idea what that means to me." "I think I might," Owen said. "My father always told me I was too soft for ranching, that I cared too much about the individual animals and not enough about the bottom line. He wanted me to be harder, more ruthless. When I took over after he died, everyone expected me to fail within a year. 5 years later, this ranch is more successful than it ever was under his management, and I did it by being exactly the kind of rancher he said I could not be. So yeah, I understand what it is like when people tell you that you cannot do something." The moment stretched between them, charged with an understanding that went deeper than words. Then Zelda smiled, a real smile that transformed her whole face and made Owen's heart do a strange little flip in his chest. "Well then," she said, "I guess we are both going to prove people wrong together." The next morning, Zelda began her work in earnest. Owen watched from a distance as she gathered the ranch hands in the main corral and started demonstrating techniques for faster, more efficient roping. She began with the basics, showing them how to properly coil a lasso and the importance of the wrist motion in getting a clean throw. Several of the men looked skeptical at first, but as Zelda continued her demonstration, even the doubters began paying attention. She had a gift for teaching, Owen realized. She broke down complex movements into simple steps, and she never talked down to the men or made them feel stupid for asking questions. When Pete struggled with a particular technique, she worked with him patiently until he got it right, then praised his improvement genuinely. When Johnny tried to show off and fumbled his rope, she did not embarrass him, but instead used it as a teaching moment about the importance of control over speed. By noon, even Red had wandered over to watch, though he maintained a stubborn distance from the group. Owen made a mental note to have that conversation with his former foreman soon, before the resentment hardened into something more problematic. Owen himself spent the morning reviewing the ranch's financial records and planning for the upcoming cattle drive to the railhead in Pecos. They had over 500 head ready for market, and the drive would require careful coordination. As he worked, he found his attention drifting repeatedly to the window that overlooked the training corral. He could see Zelda moving among the men, her voice carrying faintly through the glass, and he caught himself smiling for no particular reason. This was dangerous territory. Zelda worked for him. She was his employee, his foreman, and he had a responsibility to maintain professional boundaries. Getting involved with her romantically would be complicated at best, disastrous at worst. If things went wrong, he could lose the best roper he had ever seen and create all kinds of awkward tension in his operation. But logic and reason had little defense against the way his pulse quickened every time she smiled, or the way he found himself inventing reasons to be near the training corral. Owen had always prided himself on his discipline and self-control, but Zelda Freeman was testing both to their limits. The week passed in a blur of activity. Zelda continued her training sessions, and Owen began to see real improvement in his crew's efficiency. The men were roping faster and with greater accuracy, and even the difficult animals were being handled with more skill. Pete had indeed become one of Zelda's strongest supporters, often staying after the official training sessions to practice techniques she had shown him. Johnny's showing off had transformed into genuine effort to improve, and the other hands were following suit. The only dark cloud was Red. Owen finally cornered his former foreman on Friday evening as the man was heading to the bunkhouse after dinner. "Red, we need to talk." The foreman stopped but did not turn around immediately, When he finally faced Owen, his expression was carefully blank. "What about boss?" "About the fact that you have been avoiding Zelda all week and acting like a thundercloud every time someone mentions her name. I know this transition has not been easy for you, but we need to clear the air." Red's jaw tightened. "You want me to clear the air? Fine. I think you made a mistake, Owen. I think you let a pretty face and some fancy rope work blind you to the reality of what it takes to run a ranch. That woman has been here less than a week, and she has already disrupted everything. The men are taking sides, half of them wanting to impress her and the other half resenting the hell out of her. And you are walking around with your head in the clouds, pretending not to notice." Owen felt his own temper rise at the accusation, but forced himself to stay calm. "What I notice is that our crew's efficiency has improved measurably in just 1 week. What I notice is that Zelda has done exactly what I hired her to do, and she has done it well. As for taking sides, the only person causing division is you with your sulking and resentment. You are a good man and a skilled rancher, Red, but you need to decide whether you can accept the changes I have made or whether you need to move on." "Maybe I do need to move on," Red shot back. "Maybe I do not want to work for someone who makes decisions with his heart instead of his head." The words stung, because there was a kernel of truth in them that Owen did not want to examine too closely. "If that is how you feel, then I will write you a letter of recommendation and pay you through the end of the month. But you should know that if you leave, you will be walking away from a good position over nothing but pride." Red stared at him for a long moment, conflict warring across his weathered features. Finally, he shook his head. "I need to think about it." "Take the weekend," Owen said. "But I need an answer by Monday morning." After Red walked away, Owen stood alone in the gathering darkness, feeling the weight of the confrontation settle over him. He did not want to lose Red, who despite his current attitude was a valuable employee with years of experience. But he also would not apologize for hiring Zelda or second-guess his decision to make her foreman. That sounded intense. Owen turned to find Zelda standing in the doorway of the house. The light from inside silhouetted her figure, and for a moment his breath caught in his throat. "You heard." "Some of it. I am sorry I am causing problems for you." "You are not causing anything," Owen said firmly, walking over to join her on the porch. "Red is causing his own problems by refusing to adapt. That is not on you." Zelda leaned against the porch railing, her expression troubled in the dim light. "He is right about one thing, though. I have disrupted the dynamics here. The men are divided, and that is not good for the ranch. The men are adjusting to change, which is always uncomfortable. But they are also improving their skills and becoming better at their jobs. Give it time, Zelda. Things will settle." Owen moved to stand beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Besides, a little disruption is not always a bad thing. Sometimes we need to be shaken out of old patterns to see new possibilities." She turned her head to look at him, and Owen became acutely aware of how close they were standing. He could see the flecks of gold in her green eyes, could count the faint freckles across the bridge of her nose from days spent in the Texas sun. His heart was pounding in a way that had nothing to do with the confrontation with Red, and everything to do with the woman standing inches from him. "Owen," Zelda said softly, and the way she said his name made something tighten in his chest. "What are we doing here?" "What do you mean?" "I mean this," she gestured between them. "The way you look at me, the way I find myself looking for you throughout the day. This is not just about roping cattle and running a ranch, and we both know it." Owen knew he should step back, should maintain that professional distance he had told himself was so important. Instead, he found himself moving closer. "No," he admitted, "it is not just about the ranch. From the moment you roped that steer, I have not been able to stop thinking about you. And I know that is complicated and probably inappropriate given that you work for me, but I have never been good at lying to myself." Zelda's eyes searched his face, and he could see her own internal struggle reflected there. "I did not come here looking for this," she said. "I came here to work, to prove I could do this job, to build a life on my own terms. I know, and you do not have to do anything about this. We can just ignore it and focus on the work. I will not pressure you or make things uncomfortable. Your job is safe regardless of what happens between us personally. I need you to know that." "What if I do not want to ignore it?" Zelda asked, and the vulnerability in her voice nearly undid him. "What if I have been thinking about you too? What if every time you smile at me or stand close like this, I feel something I have not felt in years? Maybe ever?" Owen reached up slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and gently cupped her face with his hand. Her skin was warm beneath his palm, soft despite the calluses and hard work. "Then I guess we figure this out together. One day at a time, with honesty and respect. No games, no pretending. Just two people who are drawn to each other, trying to navigate something unexpected." "That sounds terrifying," Zelda whispered. "Yeah," Owen agreed. "It does, but also kind of wonderful." He leaned in slowly, watching her eyes flutter closed as his lips met hers. The kiss was gentle at first, questioning, but when Zelda responded by pressing closer and tangling her fingers in his shirt, it deepened into something more passionate. Owen wrapped his arms around her, pulling her against him, and lost himself in the taste and feel of her. She kissed like she did everything else, with focus and intensity and a hint of wildness that made his head spin. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Owen rested his forehead against hers. "Well," he said, his voice rough, "that was unexpected." Zelda laughed, the sound surprised and delighted. "Was it, though? I think we have been heading toward this since the moment we met." "Maybe so." Owen pulled back just enough to see her face properly, "but we should probably talk about how this is going to work. I do not want the crew to think you got your position because of personal involvement, and I do not want you to feel like your job is contingent on our relationship." "Agreed on all counts," Zelda said. "We keep things professional in front of the crew. No favoritism, no public displays. At work, you are my boss and I am your foreman, but when it is just us like this, we can figure out what this is between us. That sounds reasonable." Owen kissed her forehead, then reluctantly stepped back. "I should let you get some sleep. Tomorrow is Saturday, so no formal training, but we need to check the northern fence line. One of the hands reported seeing damage from what might be cattle rustlers testing our defenses." Zelda's expression immediately turned serious. "Rustlers? That could be a problem." "It could be. Which is why I want to ride out and assess the situation myself, and I would like you to come with me if you are willing. Your eye for detail might catch something I miss." "Of course. What time?" "Early. 5 o'clock. We will need most of the day to cover the territory." They said good night, but Owen found himself reluctant to leave the porch, watching as Zelda disappeared into the house. He stood alone under the stars, replaying the kiss in his mind and wondering what he had just started. Relationships were always complicated, but this one came with layers of complexity that could create real problems if he was not careful. But as he finally headed to bed, Owen could not bring himself to regret it. For the first time in years, he felt truly excited about something beyond the ranch. Zelda Freeman had ridden into his life like a sudden thunderstorm, unexpected and powerful, and he was not about to let her ride back out without exploring what might be possible between them. The next morning dawned cool and clear, a brief respite from the brutal summer heat. Owen was already in the stable saddling his horse when Zelda arrived, her hair still damp from washing and braided neatly down her back. She had changed from her usual work clothes into heavier canvas pants and a long-sleeved shirt that would protect her from sun and brush. "Good morning," she said, and the slight shyness in her smile made Owen's heart warm. "Morning. Your horse is in the third stall. I had Johnny get her ready for you." They worked in comfortable silence, preparing for the long ride ahead. Owen packed saddlebags with water, food, and basic supplies while Zelda checked her horse's tack with the thoroughness of an experienced rider. By the time the sun cleared the horizon, they were riding out toward the northern boundary of Owen's property, a vast stretch of rough terrain that bordered open range. The ride took them through some of the most beautiful landscape Texas had to offer. The Davis Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks catching the early morning light, while the high desert plains stretched out in every direction, dotted with mesquite, juniper, and the occasional stand of cottonwoods marking a water source. Owen pointed out various landmarks as they rode, explaining the history and features of his land. "My grandfather chose this location because of the natural springs," he said, gesturing toward a rocky outcropping where water trickled down into a small pool. "Water is life out here, and having reliable sources means we can run more cattle than most operations this far west. But it also makes us a target for rustlers who want to steal livestock and anyone else who wants access to the springs." "How much trouble have you had with rustlers?" Zelda asked, her eyes scanning the landscape with the alertness of someone used to watching for danger. "Not much lately. We had some problems 5 years ago when a gang was operating in the area, but the rangers came through and cleaned most of that up. Lately, it has been quiet. Which is why the fence damage concerns me. Could be nothing, could be the start of something bigger." They reached the northern fence line just before noon and immediately saw what the ranch hand had reported. A section of the barbed wire fence had been cut cleanly, the ends pulled back to create an opening large enough for cattle to pass through. Owen dismounted and examined the damage closely, noting the precision of the cuts and the lack of rust on the exposed wire ends. "This was done recently," he said, looking up at Zelda, who had also dismounted and was studying the ground around the fence. "Within the last few days, I would say." "Look here," Zelda called, pointing to a series of tracks in the soft dirt. "2 horses, both shod. They came from the north, stopped here long enough to cut the fence, then rode east along the property line. But I do not see any cattle tracks leading out, which means either they were just testing to see if we would notice, or they got interrupted before they could actually steal anything." Owen moved to examine the tracks, impressed by her tracking skills. "You are right, and see this." He indicated a cigarette butt near one of the hoofprints. "Still fresh. I would say they were here maybe 2 days ago at most. So what do we do?" Zelda asked, her hand unconsciously moving to rest on the rifle scabbard attached to her saddle. "We fix the fence, and then we set up a watch schedule. I will have the hands take turns patrolling this section at night for the next week or so. If someone is planning to hit us, they will likely come back to test again before making a bigger move. We need to be ready." They spent the next hour repairing the fence, working together with the practiced efficiency of people who understood each other's rhythms. Owen found himself watching Zelda as she worked, appreciating not just her skill but the way she moved, the concentration on her face, the strength in her hands as she twisted wire. Last night's kiss had opened a door he had not realized he had been keeping closed, and now he found himself constantly aware of her in ways that went beyond the professional. When the fence was repaired, they took a break to eat the lunch Mrs. Chen had packed for them. They sat in the shade of a large juniper tree, sharing water from Owen's canteen and eating thick sandwiches of beef and cheese. "Can I ask you something personal?" Owen said as they ate. "I suppose that depends on what it is," Zelda replied with a slight smile. "You mentioned you had brothers. Is it just the one who inherited your father's ranch, or are there others?" Zelda's expression grew more serious. "3 brothers total. Samuel is the oldest, he is the one who got the ranch. Then there is Daniel and Marcus, twins who are 2 years younger than me. They both work for Samuel now. We were close growing up, all of us. My father treated me the same as my brothers, taught me everything he taught them. It was Samuel who changed after father died, who decided I needed to be something other than what I was." "You miss them. Your family, I mean." "Sometimes," Zelda admitted. "I miss how things used to be when we were kids. We would ride out together, compete to see who could rope the fastest or ride the wildest horse. Daniel and Marcus always treated me as an equal. But after father died and Samuel started in on his campaign to marry me off, they stood by and let it happen. They loved me, but not enough to stand up to Samuel on my behalf. That hurt more than Samuel's rejection, if I am being honest." Owen nodded, understanding the pain of family disappointment. "My father and I were never close. He was a hard man who believed affection made you weak. When I took over the ranch and started making changes, implementing what he considered soft policies like better treatment for the horses and fair wages for the hands, I could practically hear him turning over in his grave. But the ranch has thrived, and I sleep better at night knowing I am running things according to my own values, not his." "Do you ever wish you had his approval?" Zelda asked softly. "Every day," Owen admitted. "But I have learned that some people cannot give what they do not have. My father did not know how to show approval or affection, so he could not give those things to me. It does not mean I was not worthy of them. It just means he was limited in ways that were not my fault." Zelda reached over and squeezed his hand. "Thank you for sharing that. It helps to know I am not alone in feeling this way." They sat together in comfortable silence for a while, watching the landscape shimmer in the midday heat. Owen felt a sense of peace he had not experienced in years, a feeling of being understood and accepted for who he was. Zelda had wandered into his life barely a week ago, but already she felt essential, like she had always been meant to be there. The ride back to the ranch took them through different terrain, past a section where a small herd of Owen's cattle grazed peacefully. Zelda pointed out several animals that looked ready to drop calves soon, and they discussed plans for monitoring the pregnant cows during the critical birthing period. "I noticed you have a good mix of breeds," Zelda observed. "Mostly longhorns, but I saw some Herefords and what looked like crossbreeds. You have a good eye. My father only raised longhorns, said they were the only breed tough enough for this climate. But I started experimenting with crossbreeding a few years ago, trying to get animals that combine the hardiness of longhorns with the better meat quality of breeds like Herefords. So far, the results have been promising." "That is smart ranching," Zelda said approvingly. "Adapting to market demands while respecting the environmental challenges. Not many ranchers think that far ahead." They arrived back at the main ranch complex as the sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon. Owen helped Zelda unsaddle her horse, their hands brushing as they worked, sending small electric jolts through him each time they touched. When the horses were settled and fed, they stood together in the stable yard, neither quite ready to part ways. "I should check in with Pete about tomorrow's work schedule," Zelda said, but she made no move to leave. "And I need to review the supply inventory before placing an order in town Monday," Owen replied, equally stationary. They stood looking at each other, and then Zelda laughed. "This is ridiculous. We are acting like nervous teenagers." "Maybe a little," Owen admitted with a grin. "But in my defense, it has been a long time since I felt this way about someone, I am out of practice with the whole courting thing." "Is that what this is, courting?" "I would like it to be," Owen said seriously. "If you are interested. I know we are doing things backwards, starting with a kiss and working our way back to getting to know each other, but I would like to do this right, Zelda. I would like to court you properly, see where this might go." Zelda's smile was radiant. "I would like that too, though I have to warn you I am also out of practice. My last serious courtship was when I was 19, and it ended badly when the man decided I was too independent for his taste." "His loss," Owen said firmly. "Your independence is one of the things I admire most about you." They were interrupted by the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Red came riding up to the stable, dusty and tired from a day working the southern pastures. He pulled up short when he saw Owen and Zelda standing together, his expression darkening. "Boss," he said curtly, barely acknowledging Zelda. "We have a problem with the water pump at the south well. It needs repair and we are going to need parts from town." "I will add it to Monday's supply run," Owen said, noting the tension in Red's posture. "Anything else?" "No." Red dismounted and led his horse into the stable without another word, but Owen did not miss the hostile glance he shot in Zelda's direction. "He really hates me," Zelda said quietly once Red was out of earshot. "He hates change," Owen corrected. "And he is angry at me for making decisions he disagrees with. You are just the visible symbol of that change. I am going to have to make a final decision about him soon." This tension is not sustainable. Sunday brought church services in Marfa, a weekly tradition Owen tried to maintain when ranch duties allowed. The small church was the social center of the community, where ranchers and townspeople gathered to worship, exchange news, and conduct informal business. Owen dressed in his best suit and invited Zelda to join him, introducing her to the community as his new foreman. The reactions ranged from curious to scandalized. Several of the older women whispered behind their fans, while the men regarded Zelda with a mixture of skepticism and interest. But Zelda handled it all with grace, answering questions about her background and experience with calm confidence. Owen found himself impressed yet again by her composure under pressure. After the service, the pastor, Reverend Mitchell, pulled Owen aside. "That is quite the unusual hiring decision you have made, Owen. A woman foreman. I imagine that is causing some talk." "It is causing some talk," Owen acknowledged. "But she is also the best roper I have ever seen, and she is already improving my crew's efficiency." "Sometimes the right choice is not the conventional choice. Just be careful," the Reverend said, his tone kindly. "Change comes hard to people, especially in a community like ours, and people will talk if they see you spending too much time with an unmarried woman in your employ." "Let them talk," Owen said, more sharply than he intended. "I am running a ranch, not a social club. Zelda Freeman is my employee and she is doing excellent work. That is all that matters." But as he walked back to where Zelda was chatting with Mrs. Chen and a few other ladies, Owen could not help but notice the speculative looks being cast their way. Small towns thrived on gossip, and he and Zelda were providing plenty of fodder. He would need to be careful about how they conducted their relationship in public, at least until it became clear that this was serious and not just a passing fancy. The following week brought its own challenges and triumphs. On Monday morning, Red approached Owen in his office and announced he had decided to stay on at the ranch. "I do not agree with all your decisions," Red said bluntly, "but I have been thinking about what you said, about pride getting in the way. This is a good position and you are a fair boss. I would be a fool to walk away just because my feelings got hurt, so I am staying if you will have me." "I am glad to hear it," Owen said sincerely. "I value your experience and your dedication to this ranch, Red, I meant what I said before about this being a partnership. Zelda handles training and difficult animals. You handle day-to-day operations and crew management. We all work together to make this place successful. Red nodded stiffly. I will do my job, but I am not promising I will ever like the situation. You do not have to like it, Owen said. You just have to work with it. It was not perfect, but it was progress. Over the following days, Owen noticed Red making more of an effort to cooperate with Zelda, though their interactions remained cool and professional. The rest of the crew continued to improve under Zelda's training, and even Johnny Martinez had stopped his complaining and started taking the work seriously. Owen and Zelda fell into a pattern of working together during the day and stealing private moments in the evening. They would meet on the front porch after dinner, talking about everything from cattle breeding strategies to their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Owen learned that Zelda loved thunderstorms and hated confined spaces, that she read voraciously whenever she could get her hands on books, that she had once dreamed of seeing the ocean, but had never traveled farther east than San Antonio. In turn, he shared his own stories, his memories of learning to ride from his grandfather, his struggles with his father's harsh expectations, his vision for expanding the ranch into one of the most successful operations in West Texas. Zelda listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions and offering insights that often made him see things from new perspectives. The physical attraction between them continued to simmer beneath every interaction. Sometimes, Owen would catch Zelda watching him with a look that made his pulse race. Other times, their hands would brush while working and linger just a moment too long. They had not kissed again since that first night, but the anticipation built with each passing day, a sweet tension that made Owen feel more alive than he had in years. 3 weeks after Zelda's arrival, Owen received word that rustlers had been spotted near a neighboring ranch, making off with a dozen head of cattle. He immediately doubled the night patrols on his property and organized a meeting with several other local ranchers to discuss coordinated security measures. The meeting took place at the Marfa Hotel on a Wednesday evening. Owen brought Zelda with him, valuing her input and wanting the other ranchers to see her competence firsthand. The group included some of the biggest cattle operations in the region, men like Samuel Thornton, who ran over 5,000 head, and James Keller, whose family had been ranching in the area since before Texas became a state. When Owen introduced Zelda as his foreman, the reaction was predictably skeptical. Samuel Thornton barely glanced at her before turning his attention back to Owen. "This is a serious matter, Lattimer. We are talking about organized rustling, probably a gang working the whole territory. Maybe you should have brought your actual foreman instead of bringing along whatever this is." Owen felt his temper flare, but Zelda spoke before he could respond. "This is a serious matter, Mr. Thornton, which is why Mr. Lattimer brought the person most qualified to discuss security and cattle management. I have been coordinating night patrols on his property for the past 2 weeks, and I have experience tracking and identifying suspicious activity. Unless you have specific concerns about my qualifications, perhaps we could focus on the actual problem at hand instead of who is sitting at the table." Several of the men looked taken aback by her directness, but Owen saw grudging respect flicker across a few faces. James Keller leaned forward, his weathered face creasing into a slight smile. "She has a point, Sam. I have heard about Miss Freeman here. Pete Sanderson was telling me just last week how much Owen's crew has improved since she came on board. Maybe we should listen to what she has to say." The meeting proceeded, with everyone sharing information about recent suspicious activity and discussing strategies for protecting their herds. Zelda contributed several practical suggestions, including a rotating patrol schedule that would allow ranchers to support each other without overtaxing their individual crews. By the end of the evening, even Samuel Thornton seemed grudgingly impressed, and several of the ranchers made a point of thanking Zelda for her input as they departed. "You handled that well," Owen said as they rode back to the ranch under a sky full of stars. "Thornton is not an easy man to win over. He still does not like me," Zelda said, "but he respects competence, and I gave him no choice but to acknowledge mine. Sometimes that is the best you can hope for." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the horses' hoofbeats the only sound in the quiet night. Then Owen spoke, voicing something that had been on his mind for days. "Zelda, I need to tell you something. That sounds ominous. It is not, I hope. It is just that these past few weeks, getting to know you, working with you, spending time with you, it has made me realize something. I am falling in love with you." He heard her sharp intake of breath, but could not see her expression clearly in the darkness. When she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. "Owen, I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything right now," he assured her quickly. "I just wanted you to know where I stand, what this is becoming for me. I know we have not been doing this very long, and I know there are complications with you working for me. But I have never felt this way about anyone, and I did not want to keep pretending this was just casual attraction." They had reached the ranch, and Owen pulled his horse to a stop. Zelda did the same, then dismounted and walked over to where Owen was sliding down from his saddle. In the light spilling from the house windows, he could see tears glistening in her eyes. "I am falling in love with you too," she said softly. "It terrifies me because I came here to build an independent life, to prove I did not need anyone. But somewhere along the way, I stopped wanting to prove anything and started just wanting to be with you." Owen pulled her into his arms, holding her close and breathing in the scent of her hair. "You do not have to give up your independence to be with me," he murmured against her temple. "I fell in love with you because of who you are, not despite it. I do not want to change you, Zelda. I just want to be part of your life." She tilted her face up to his, and Owen kissed her with all the pent-up longing of the past 3 weeks. This kiss was different from the first one, deeper and more certain, a promise of things to come. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Zelda rested her head against his chest. "What do we do now?" she asked. "Now," Owen said, "we keep doing what we have been doing. We work together, we build something together, and we see where this takes us, one day at a time." The summer progressed into fall, bringing cooler weather and the massive undertaking of the cattle roundup. Owen's ranch hummed with activity as the crew worked to gather the scattered herds, sort the cattle, and prepare them for the drive to market. Zelda proved invaluable during this time, her training having prepared the hands well for the intense work required. She also proved herself capable of handling the wild mustangs that Owen had been planning to break. Over the course of several weeks, she worked with 5 young horses, using a combination of patience, skill, and intuition to transform them from unpredictable wild animals into reliable mounts. Owen watched her work with the horses and saw the same qualities he had fallen in love with, the strength combined with gentleness, the determination balanced with compassion. Their relationship continued to deepen through the fall months, though they remained discreet in front of the crew. Late evenings on the porch became the times Owen looked forward to most, when he and Zelda could talk and laugh and steal kisses away from watchful eyes. He learned her favorite foods and her least favorite chores, the way she hummed when she was happy and the stubborn set of her jaw when she was frustrated. In October, Owen took Zelda to Fort Davis for the annual harvest celebration, a regional event that drew people from all over West Texas. They danced together for the first time, Owen holding her close as a small band played waltzes and reels. He could feel the eyes of the community on them, the speculation and gossip, but for once he did not care. Let them talk. He was proud to be seen with Zelda, proud to show the world that he had found something rare and precious. That night, as they drove the wagon back to the ranch under a brilliant canopy of stars, Owen made a decision. He pulled the horses to a stop at a scenic overlook that provided a sweeping view of his land spreading out below. "Zelda," he said, turning to face her, "I know we have only known each other for a few months. I know some people would say this is too fast, too impulsive. But I have spent enough years waiting for the right moment to know it when it arrives. I love you. I love your strength and your skill and your stubborn independence. I love the way you challenge me and support me and make me want to be a better man. And I want to spend the rest of my life loving you, if you will have me." He pulled a small velvet box from his coat pocket and opened it to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond that caught the starlight. "Zelda Freeman, will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Zelda's face as she nodded emphatically. "Yes. Yes, Owen, I will marry you. I love you so much it scares me sometimes. You have given me everything I did not even know I was looking for, a home, a purpose, and someone who sees me for exactly who I am. Of course I will marry you." Owen slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her with a joy that felt like it might burst out of his chest. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying, Zelda held up her hand to admire the ring. "It was my grandmother's," Owen explained. "One of the few things my father kept after she died. I found it in his papers after he passed, and I held on to it thinking maybe someday I would have someone to give it to. I am glad I waited. It belongs with you." They were married in late November at the Marfa Church, with Reverend Mitchell officiating and what seemed like the entire town in attendance. Pete Sanderson gave Zelda away, having become something of a father figure to her over the months. Even Red managed a genuine smile during the ceremony, his earlier resentment having mellowed into acceptance if not quite friendship. Mrs. Chen prepared a feast for the reception at the ranch, and the celebration lasted late into the night with music, dancing, and toasts to the happy couple. Owen danced with his bride under strings of lanterns hung across the yard, feeling happier than he had ever thought possible. Zelda glowed in a simple white dress she had made herself, her dark hair crowned with wildflowers, and Owen thought she had never looked more beautiful. When they finally escaped to the privacy of Owen's room, which was now their room, Owen carried Zelda over the threshold and set her down gently. They made love for the first time that night, discovering each other with wonder and tenderness. Owen took his time learning what made Zelda gasp and sigh, and she responded with a passion that matched his own. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, talking in whispers about the future they would build together. The winter of 1884 and into 1885 was mild by Texas standards, which allowed for continued work on the ranch. Zelda officially became Zelda Lattimer, though she kept using Freeman for work purposes to avoid confusion among business contacts. She continued her role as foreman, now with added authority as the owner's wife, and the operation thrived under their joint management. In February, Zelda discovered she was pregnant. The news filled Owen with a joy so profound he could barely speak when she told him. They shared the information with the ranch hands at dinner that evening, and the congratulations were genuine and heartfelt. Even Red raised his glass in a sincere toast to the future heir of the Lattimer Ranch. "Boy or girl, that child is going to be one hell of a roper with you two for parents," Pete said, grinning broadly. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the spring and summer, though Zelda insisted on continuing to work despite Owen's worries. She modified her duties as her belly grew, focusing more on training and less on the physically demanding roping work. But she remained an integral part of the ranch operation. In early September of 1885, with the help of the local midwife and Mrs. Chen, Zelda gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Thomas William Lattimer, Thomas after Owen's beloved grandfather and William after Zelda's father. Owen held his son for the first time with shaking hands, marveling at the tiny perfect features and the strong grip of those miniature fingers. "He has your eyes," Zelda said weakly from the bed, exhausted but radiant. "And your stubborn chin," Owen replied with a laugh. "This poor kid does not stand a chance. He is going to be as headstrong as both of us combined." Fatherhood transformed Owen in ways he had not expected. He found himself working more efficiently during the day, so he could spend evenings with Zelda and Thomas, rocking his son and singing the lullabies his grandmother had sung to him as a child. He watched in wonder as Thomas grew and developed, reaching for objects, learning to smile, responding to the sound of his parents' voices. Zelda proved to be a devoted mother without sacrificing her role on the ranch. She brought Thomas with her to the training corral once he was old enough, setting up a safe play area where he could watch his mother work. The ranch hands doted on the baby, taking turns entertaining him during breaks and teaching him to clap along when they sang cowboy songs around the evening fire. 2 years later, in the summer of 1887, Zelda gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah Margaret, combining Owen's mother's name with Zelda's favorite aunt. Sarah was a quieter baby than Thomas had been, with Zelda's dark hair and a thoughtful expression that made her seem wise beyond her infant years. With 2 small children, life on the ranch became even more hectic and infinitely more fulfilling. Owen often paused in his work to watch Zelda playing with the children in the yard, teaching Thomas his letters or singing to Sarah while she nursed. These moments of domestic happiness filled him with a contentment he had never imagined possible during his solitary years before Zelda arrived. The ranch itself continued to prosper. Owen's crossbreeding program proved successful, producing cattle that commanded premium prices at market. Zelda's training methods became well known throughout the region, and other ranchers began sending their hands to learn from her. The Lattimer Ranch gained a reputation as one of the best-run operations in West Texas, known for both its quality livestock and its progressive management practices. In the fall of 1888, Zelda received an unexpected letter from her brother Daniel. He wrote that Samuel had lost the family ranch to gambling debts and that he and Marcus were looking for new positions. Would there be room for them at the Lattimer Ranch? Zelda brought the letter to Owen, her expression conflicted. "I do not know what to say to him. Part of me wants to tell him no, that they made their choice when they did not stand up for me 4 years ago. But another part remembers how close we used to be." Owen read the letter carefully, then looked at his wife. "What does your heart tell you?" "That family is complicated and messy, but it is still family. That people can change and grow, and maybe my brothers have done that. That I want my children to know their uncles, even if those relationships are not perfect. Then we bring them on," Owen said. "We give them a chance to prove themselves, and we see what happens. If they work hard and treat you with respect, then they stay. If they bring old drama and attitudes, then they go. Simple as that." Daniel and Marcus Freeman arrived in late October, both thinner and more weathered than Zelda remembered. The reunion was emotional and complicated, with apologies and explanations flowing freely. The twins expressed genuine remorse for not supporting their sister when she needed them, and they were clearly awed by what she had accomplished. "You have done amazing things, Zelda," Daniel said, looking around at the prosperous ranch. "Father would be so proud of you." "I am so sorry we did not see that sooner." "What matters is that you see it now," Zelda replied, though Owen noticed she kept a certain guardedness in her interactions with her brothers, at least at first. Over time, the Freeman twins proved themselves to be skilled ranch hands who respected their sister's authority completely. They integrated well with the crew, and Thomas and Sarah delighted in having two uncles who spoiled them with attention and treats. Slowly, the family wounds began to heal, though Zelda confided to Owen that she did not think she would ever fully trust her brothers the way she had before. "And that is okay," Owen assured her. "Trust has to be rebuilt, and that takes time. What matters is that everyone is making the effort." The years rolled on, bringing changes and challenges, but also deep satisfactions. In 1890, Zelda gave birth to their third child, another boy they named Joseph after Owen's uncle who had helped him when he first took over the ranch. The family grew and thrived, the children learning to ride almost before they could walk, absorbing the ranch life as naturally as breathing. Thomas showed particular aptitude for working with cattle, displaying his mother's natural talent with a rope by the time he was 6 years old. Sarah preferred the horses, spending hours in the stable and learning everything she could about their care and training. Joseph was still too young to show clear preferences, but he toddled around the ranch with fearless enthusiasm, getting into everything and charming everyone he met. Owen and Zelda settled into a comfortable partnership that balanced their professional responsibilities with their personal relationship. They still made time for evening conversations on the porch, though now they were often joined by children wanting one more story before bed. They still shared private jokes and stolen kisses, still supported each other through difficulties, and celebrated each other's successes. On their 10th wedding anniversary in November of 1894, Owen took Zelda back to the overlook where he had proposed. The children were spending the night with their uncles, giving the couple a rare evening alone. 10 years, Owen mused, looking out over the land that had become their shared legacy. Sometimes it feels like you just rode in yesterday. Other times, I cannot remember what my life was like before you. It was probably more peaceful, Zelda teased, leaning against his side. Less rope training, fewer children running wild, no wife to challenge your decisions. It was boring and lonely and only half a life, Owen corrected, wrapping his arm around her. You gave me everything, Zelda. Purpose and passion and a family I never dared dream I could have. These have been the best 10 years of my life, and I am looking forward to the next 50. Only 50? Zelda asked with a smile. I was hoping for at least 60 more. Owen laughed and kissed her as the sun set over the Texas landscape they both loved. Below them, the ranch lay spread out like a promise fulfilled, the home they had built together through hard work, mutual respect, and enduring love. The Lattimer Ranch continued to grow and prosper into the new century. Thomas eventually took over much of the day-to-day operations, proving himself a skilled rancher who combined his mother's technical abilities with his father's business acumen. Sarah married a neighboring rancher in 1905, uniting two of the largest operations in the region. Joseph showed a talent for the business side of ranching, managing accounts and negotiating contracts with the railroads and meat packers. Zelda continued working with the ranch hands well into her 50s, still the best roper on the property and still commanding respect from everyone who met her. She and Owen became fixtures in the Marfa community, known for their fair dealing and their progressive approaches to ranching. They supported the local school, contributed to the church, and mentored young ranchers just starting out. In their later years, as grandchildren began arriving and their hair turned silver, Owen and Zelda would often sit together on that same front porch where they had shared so many conversations over the decades. They would watch the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors and reflect on the unlikely journey that had brought them together. You ever wonder what would have happened if you had not placed that advertisement in the newspaper? Zelda asked one evening when they were both in their 60s. Every day, Owen admitted. And then I thank God that I did and that you were brave enough to answer it. You could rope and tie faster than my foreman, so I made you my new foreman. Best decision I ever made. Second best, Zelda corrected with a smile. The best decision was when you asked me to marry you. Fair point, Owen conceded, taking her hand and bringing it to his lips. Though I would argue they were both part of the same decision, really. The decision to see you for who you truly were and to love you for it. They sat together as the stars began to emerge, two people who had found each other against the odds and built a life that exceeded anything either had imagined. The ranch continued its work around them, their children and grandchildren carrying on the legacy they had created together. And if sometimes the wind carried the sound of laughter or the singing of a lasso through the air, it was just the echo of two lives well lived, two hearts that had found their home in the wild Texas landscape and in each other's arms. Owen Lattimer and Zelda Freeman Lattimer lived long, productive lives surrounded by family and purpose. When they finally passed, within months of each other in 1920, the entire community of Marfa turned out to honor them. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, their graves marked by simple headstones that read, "Beloved Partner," on both, a testament to the equal partnership they had forged in an era when such things were rare. Their children and grandchildren continued the ranch for generations, each one learning the lessons of skill, respect, and love that Owen and Zelda had embodied.